This is where things start to get especially interesting. People who aren't strongly drawn to sports often show what psychologists describe as lower tribal orientation. Their sense of identity isn't tightly connected to belonging to a larger group. They are typically more self-focused in a healthy way. They are more likely to think, I don't need a group identity to feel complete. And this idea isn't just theoretical. Research supports it. A study published in 2019 found that individuals with low interest in sports showed significantly less US versus them thinking. Put simply, they're less likely to dislike another team purely because it represents the opposite side. But it doesn't stop there. What happens in the brain of a highly engaged sports fan during a game is fascinating from a scientific perspective. Think about the excitement you feel right before opening a gift. That sense of anticipation is linked to dopamine activity in the brain. Sports viewers experience a similar response while watching games. With every play, every shift in momentum, a steady pattern of anticipation followed by resolution. In simple terms, it's highly engaging. Brain imaging research suggests that following a favorite team activates reward-related areas of the brain similar to those involved in other compelling activities. And here's the key insight. Uncertainty plays a major role. Not knowing how the game will end helps sustain interest and emotional engagement. Psychologists refer to this as variable reinforcement. One of the most effective ways to hold attention. It's the same basic principle seen in many interactive and entertainment experiences. The underlying mechanism resembles other forms of strong behavioral engagement. The brain doesn't sharply differentiate between sources of reward. It mainly responds to patterns of anticipation and satisfaction. People who aren't interested in sports simply don't experience that same response from watching competitive events they're not directly involved in. Genetics may also influence this. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine-related genes can be associated with how much someone enjoys watching competitive activities. Take a moment to consider that. Your complete indifference to whether the Lakers win or lose might be partially shaped by biology. But that's only one layer. Sports fans often experience what psychologists call basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won." When the team loses, it becomes "they lost." Notice the shift in wording? Those who don't focus on sports are less likely to engage in this mental separation. Their sense of identity tends to remain more consistent. They don't rely on external victories to feel successful. Their self-esteem is generally steadier and less dependent on outcomes beyond their control. To be clear, this isn't about claiming one approach is better than the other. It's about recognizing real psychological differences and finding them genuinely interesting. Here's where it may sound counterintuitive. Dedicated sports fans often score higher on certain measures of empathy. They regularly practice caring about the challenges of others, even when those people are strangers united by a team. So why doesn't that same empathy show up in people who don't follow sports? It comes down to where empathy is directed. Everyone has a limited capacity for deep emotional investment. People who aren't into sports often channel that capacity toward other areas: social causes, close relationships, creative work, or intellectual pursuits. A 2021 study found that low sports interest was strongly associated with higher openness to experience and a greater appreciation for art and beauty. They find emotional depth through music, art, nature, and ideas. Their brains are seeking the same things: meaning, connection, fulfillment, just through different paths. There's another important point to acknowledge. For some people, disengaging from sports can serve as a form of self-protection. Maybe they had uncomfortable experiences in physical education. Maybe sports culture made them feel excluded. Maybe they're uncomfortable with the intensity or competitiveness often associated with fandom. Or maybe they simply never understood why adults get emotionally invested in televised games. Your lack of interest may have a personal history, or maybe you just find it uninteresting. Either way, both explanations are completely valid, and this helps explain why sports fans and non-fans sometimes struggle to understand each other. It ultimately comes down to how meaning is experienced. For sports enthusiasts, meaning often comes from narrative. The underdog win, the comeback, the long-standing rivalry, the rise of a dynasty. It works because it's unscripted drama with real emotional stakes. People who feel indifferent toward sports may see that unpredictability as irrelevant. They might ask, why invest emotionally in an outcome I can't influence, carried out by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't affect my real life? That viewpoint isn't wrong, but neither is the sports fan's perspective. These are simply two different ways of satisfying the human need for story and meaning. One group finds powerful narratives in a championship season. The other finds them in novels, relationships, creative projects, or scientific discovery. Researchers describe this contrast as parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans often form one-sided emotional connections with teams and athletes. People who don't follow sports prefer to invest emotionally where there's reciprocity, where their involvement can make a difference, where they're participants rather than observers. Neither approach is superior. They're simply different ways of navigating life. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, known for his research on optimal experience, showed that flow states, those moments of full immersion, can arise from countless activities. For some, that comes from watching sports. For others, it comes from almost anything else. And here's what's especially interesting. People who don't fixate on sports often report feeling more present in their own lives. They're not spending hours each week absorbed in someone else's challenges. They're focused on their own. There's something quietly powerful about that. So what does all this mean? If sports don't interest you, you're not missing a fundamental human experience. You're simply different. Your reward system, your sense of belonging, the way you direct empathy, they're all calibrated differently. And that's perfectly okay. The next time someone asks if you watched the game and you genuinely don't care, remember this. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game. One that may, in its own way, carry very real stakes. If this resonated with you, you'll likely enjoy exploring why quiet people process information differently and how that difference can become a real advantage. Choose one of these videos to discover why your thinking doesn't always follow the crowd.